may have a lot of shade in your yard, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's all kinds of beautiful and interesting plants that you can grow in your yard, including flowers and interesting foliage. I'm here with Gene Bush at Munchkin Nursery and Gardens. Gene, why don't you tell me about some of these beautiful plants we have today?
First of all, it's not difficult to have a wonderful garden with lots of color in the shade. It's a matter of just simply becoming aware and then going from there. One of the things that we like to do is work on pairing things up to give you more of a broader selection to go in your garden. I would start with something like an easy plant such as the ARALIA called Sun King.
Okay.
And then pair it up with the dark foliage ACTAEA, used to be Semisifuga. It's a good pair, and then back it up perhaps with a little bit of lace, okay, in a fern. This is a lady fern called, well, it's a red stem lady fern.
Tell me about this flower here.
This is one of my favorites, the martagon section of lilies. Martagons have a breeding history, goes back over 100 years. So there's a wonderful selection of them. They're easy plants to go. In Europe, where they originate, they have a very wide range of where they grow, so it makes them easy to fit into a garden. Wonderful color in midsummer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize, or they think that just because they have shade, they can't really have a lot of flowers. They think it's mostly foliage and ferns and this and that. So there are some really interesting flowers like that you can grow in the shade, such as this, cardinal flower over here.
And if you need a little something exotic in the garden, perhaps you could go for the Voodoo lily. Kind of looks like a python standing on its tail.
Yeah.
It doesn't bite, but it gets the wonderful umbrella-like foliage. This foliage, by the time summer's over, will be about like this. Very, very exotic, but hardy and easy to grow in the shade garden.
Now tell me about this hydrangea right here.
This is my favorite. If I could only have one shrub in the garden, it'd be Hydrangea arborescens Starburst, Hayes Starburst. Wonderful little delicate doubled blooms. This begins in early summer, blooms all the way into early fall. And we have it growing in heavy clay over limestone ledge. We do not water it, and it still gives us bloom that long period. So it's a wonderful doer especially for a novice just beginning.
And here's another kind of semi-recent on the market, kind of tropical feel. What's this plant?
This is ASTROMERIA Vinco Ice. Wonderful blooms. You're probably more familiar with this as a cut flower at the florist, and it's been found to have a much broader range and hardiness than was expected. This has been growing in Michigan out in the open gardens for the past 3 years. So this is a trial that we're doing this year, and I hope to put this along with something of this nature, okay, something tall, a group of this. So.
Yeah, and again, the interesting flowers in the shade that you might not expect to see in a typical shade garden. Tell me about this silver plant right here.
Okay, Brunnera, it does have, this is looking glass. It's one of the more silver foliage. The wonderful thing about this is not so much the blooms, which are blue with a small white eye, but the silver foliage really lights up a dark corner. Take that, put it with something very, very lacy behind it for good contrast in foliage. There's, in shade, probably one of the things that's first learned is foliage. Okay, and that's the same is true with any perennial. You'll have a short bloom period, but you'll have a long period of foliage. So you want to learn how to contrast and group foliage probably before the blooms themselves.
You don't necessarily need a large area to fill your garden with all these shade plants. A lot of people just have a little corner or maybe a little area under a tree. You don't have to have 3 or 5 of each of these plants. You could just have one and kind of have a nice little specimen garden. So a few of these things really brightens up and makes an area really interesting that where before was just kind of a dusty little shady patch. So I just want to thank Gene Bush here at Munchkin Nurseries in DePaul, Indiana. And for more information, go to volunteergardener.org.